All right. We are live. Man, the internet is not broken. This is a panel of strong black women and men working together on LinkedIn. I'm so excited for this. It's finally here. I feel like I gave birth to a baby and I know I can't do that. But I appreciate all y'all. This has been a long time coming. Thank you. We got people in the backstage that can't get on yet, but they will be on soon. Welcome to Professionally Black. I want to start out first saying thank you to everybody here and backstage and people that supported this. This was an idea I had talking to Pierre and Nkechi. I had a conversation and it kind of just hit me like we need to do something with black people in a positive way, talking about what our experiences are. So I'm going to tell you what this is not. This is not us venting about how bad it is to be black. This is not bashing white people. This is not saying give us a sympathy card. This is basically for you to understand our experiences, for us to talk to each other, and for those that are not melanated to understand how we operate and how we do things. So I want to start out with some going around the horn and get everybody to introduce themselves. Y'all know who I am, and I don't need to spend time on me. But we'll start to my right with Queen Jacqueline Charles. You kick it off.
Hello, my name is Jacqueline Charles, and I'm yours truly. I'm a streaming host.
Ramona.
Hi, good morning or good afternoon. I'm Ramona Houston. I'm an American historian, and I focus on African American and Latino relations. I'm also a social entrepreneur, and I assist businesses, athletes, and entertainers in designing and executing their social impact vision.
All right, the brandpreneur.
Good afternoon, Nick F. Nelson, otherwise known as Brandpreneur. I help remarkable people, products, and organizations get noticed online.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm the co-founder of MedSnake Media, and my other co-founder is Shanae Moray. And what we do is we just create practices as well as long-term care facilities, hospitals, basically generate revenue through marketing as well as medical billing.
Hello, everybody. What's up, LinkedIn fam? Monique Russell, your clear communication coach from the beautiful islands of the Bahamas and Nigeria. Woo. I have to say that. Hello. So pretty much I teach you how to have positive and productive relationships at home and work using effective communication skills and strategies. And I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Thank you, Pierre.
Hello, everybody. I'm Pierre Campbell. I'm a leadership coach. I focus on helping people to articulate their value, especially where everybody's losing jobs or tough times, and also organizations and companies to help increase their revenue from articulating their value as well.
Nkechi.
And I'm blessed of this group to go last because y'all poured into me. So my name, Nkechi Nyera, in Igbo means I am God's gift. So I'm a gift to this experience. So excited about that. What I'm paid for, I'm an exec in tech at a fairly large financial institution in Canada. And what I'm made for, oh my gosh, I'm designed to empower people. And so I have a goal to empower 1 billion people around the world. And I live that truth every single day through everything that I just do from the time my eyes open till I go to bed. So I have an organization called Empowered in My Skin, and it's all around wellness. I truly believe in wellness, and I believe in mental health and everything that's heart and connection.
Perfect. And we got more people to come. I'll bring them on as we get a chance to. So to kind of set the stage, Pierre and I was talking, and I asked him a question when I interviewed him about how he feels about current leadership with coronavirus. And I could see him reaching in his mind for how do I say this without being the angry black man? How do I say this where it's a factual conversation, not a race baiting thing, and it's just how I feel about this? And I feel like we always deal with that. You know, we have to have our culture on one side and our professional on the other side. And we usually can't merge the two because it becomes this battle of why is it got to be all black all the time? Right. So I want to throw that out there, Pierre, since you kind of kicked this whole thing off. When you and I had that conversation, talk to the people about how you feel about the way you have to navigate the black experience as a professional right now.
So the first thing that came to mind was we have two pandemics, not just one pandemic, two pandemics. There's one where you have a set of people that's literally coming against the black male and the black female And then you have, of course, the global pandemic in the coronavirus. And what came to my mind was now is the time more than ever for every single human being. And that's important that I say that every single human being, not just Black people, but every human being to understand their purpose and their gifting. Because once the pandemic hit, all of a sudden people started to lose their jobs and they put their value in their jobs. And what your value should be in is actually who you are inside of you. Mm-hmm. So that's the first thing that came to my mind. So when you asked that question, I was like, oh my God, this is it, man. Mm-hmm. You know, value is what we should be focused on as human beings as well.
All right, so I want to have you, this is going to be an organic situation. So as we're going through this Black experience and everything's going on, I'd let you know how I feel. So for a long time, I wasn't the guy that was doing that. I went to HBCU, didn't learn about Juneteenth until I was an adult. That wasn't taught in my schooling. And my Black experience is different. I'm a military kid. I've been all over the place, and most places I went weren't heavily Black. So as I came into being an adult, I just was the person. I didn't really associate the Black side as much until getting older in my life. And I find this challenge for people that you meet them and you're like different levels of woke. You find people with different levels of enlightenment and understanding of their culture. So anybody out there can jump into this. If you think about your experiences going into the Black world and just finally realizing, hey, I am Black, I am a professional, but I got to tie the two together. What was that realization? I guess just with the Jackie, I see you open your mouth. When was that realization for you?
For me, for me, my Black experience, and I'm going to be perfectly honest, is when I moved to Georgia. Okay, because I didn't have that Black experience living in New York because I was raised around the Jewish community. So coming into my Blackness, and when I moved to Georgia, I'm like, yes! I didn't know about Juneteenth, until I moved to Georgia. So for me now, living and breathing and being around my Black people, I'm just loving it now. But like you said, I just didn't come into my Blackness until I moved to Georgia.
Okay. How about you, Courtney? I know you've been all over the place too.
Well, I've lived in many places, but I'm from upstate New York. So again, just like Jacqueline, I grew up with a lot of the Jewish community. And one of the things that, has always, I guess, kind of had, an issue with, again, is, being Black and then also being educated, supposedly, right? In gravity or air, whatever. And then, then we're going in as professionals, right? So from childhood all the way to professionalism. And, it does change in a way as you kind of grow and also are able to embrace your Blackness. And just like Jacqueline, I was with a lot of different cultures, and I was never really focused on, I would say, as an African American, growing up in a predominantly white or Jewish world. So again, for me as well, as a adult is when I really came into that, loving my hair of any way it can be, right? Being curly, being straight. Loving my skin color. That was also a big thing. I am not light skinned, but I am dark. So I had to learn to embrace that and still, teach people that, my name is Courtney. It is not something else. We are we are people that have things, right? It's not that to have any kind of confusion, when we are speaking or giving you knowledge. This is who we are, and we come in so many different colors, shapes, forms, and backgrounds. So again, I'm so excited to be here. I'm so glad that we're able to talk about this, and I'm ready for more questions.
So
thank you.
I can add a perspective. So my parents.
Yeah, your story is awesome too. Please.
My parents migrated from Nigeria, so they came from a country that was all Black, and my dad came here predominantly to get an education, got really successful really quickly, and decided to stay. And so he moved us into an affluent white neighborhood in Montreal. And so for those of you that might know Canadian history, Montreal back in 1978 was very racist, very, very white. And so living in a white affluent neighborhood where we were the only Black, there was a lot of racism that was inflicted upon myself and my family. But the interesting thing is my parents never taught us about racism. So I never really understood why I was, disregarded at school. And my parents taught me they lived life on their own terms, and they really taught us by example. So they taught me character. And so character carried me through the majority of my life. And it wasn't really until, the age of 42 when I made an intentional decision to actually be empowered in the skin that I'm in, that I stepped fully into my Blackness, And so that's a long time to live in skin that you're not necessarily fully feeling empowered in. And just to answer, and now fast forward to now we're in this, as Peter said, we're in a pandemic and there's a movement. And, this is the first time in my life where everywhere I go, work, personal, you can say white people, you can say Black people, you can say racism, you can say anti-racism, you can say white privilege, you can say, I don't actually have to code switch, you know what I mean? Like you can have those open dialogues. And if you don't want to have it, you can say, well, we're going to have it because this is the time for us to be the most uncomfortable than we've ever been in our history, in order to really affect change. And it's acceptable. Come on, like it's awesome, right? Like, and so it feels even better now to be fully encased in my Blackness.
Well, hey,
Nick, go ahead, Nick.
I've been Black my whole life. Literally, I have been. Seriously, I've been Black my whole life. I promise you. My father started one of the first Black studies programs in the country at Ohio State University. He was a good old-fashioned Afro-wearing, dashiki wearing, Black medallion. He brought Blackness. I was listening to Curtis Mayfield. I was listening to Marvin Gaye. I was listening to all things Black. I didn't even know about white people until I went to school, man. So, like, literally, I lived in a Black. The first time I ever saw Black excellence, he was doing a trip to Africa, and I get on the plane. It's Black pilots, Black stewardesses, Black everything, and I was like, "What is going on?" And I still remember that to this day in terms of just seeing that, right? Seeing an all Black airline and crew, etc. So, what he's instilled me is just to always have, pride and culture, pride in who you are, and to always just lean into it because my Blackness is my superpower. The thing about being Black is, man, Black people have influenced culture, we've influenced music, we've influenced everything. And by leaning into it, you're actually leaning into your superpower. So when I say I've been Black my whole life, I really have been. And I don't even run from it. I know how to put my conservative hat on, and I can be, right? I ain't saying super Black, but I'm Black. I am.
And we have I had Dr. Imani. Hey, Dr. Imani, can you hear us okay?
Hey, I can. Good afternoon, everyone.
Hello.
Pleasure to be here.
You know what's cool about this too?
Blackness?
Yes, please, because there's so many doctors are on this. We got more doctors in the background, but there's so many educated people on this. I wanted to have you to level us out a little bit. So go ahead, Doc.
Okay, I appreciate it. Greetings, everyone. I'm Dr. Imani. I'm a health scientist, an educator, an author, and a poet. Hopefully I'll get to share something a little later. But I grew up in New Rochelle, New York with Jamaican parents. Well, my mom is from Jamaica. My dad has a Jamaican mom. Blup, blup. So I kind of like Nick, I've been Black my whole life. I grew up in a community that was mixed, but a real clear sense of who we were. I was just telling someone the other day, Ossie Davis and Ruby Dee were neighbors of ours. And the reason I mention that is because in elementary school, I mean, his kids, we all went to the same elementary school. He did an assembly, and he was talking about how, all the Black children in the audience were from descendants of kings and queens and the builders of the pyramids. And, imagine learning about this as a I might have been 8 or 9 in elementary school, and it just really impacted my sense of who I am and what I can do in life. So I forget the sky is the limit, that the universe is the limit. And and those seeds were planted at a very young age, and I realized how important that was in terms of my development and my sense of who I am. I've worn locks most of my life. I've been wearing it short, and because of this epidemic where barbers are on strike and not working, I decided I'm going to let it grow again. Let it go. So that's just a little bit about me. But I love teaching and speaking about health and wellness and helping to open people's minds about our ability to control our health. And
you said something interesting. I want to open up something you said. You mentioned learning about your blackness, the pyramids and everything as a child. And a lot of adults, we realize the information we're taught comes from somebody who wrote a book. So, when I mentioned I went to HBCU, the textbooks didn't talk about Juneteenth. It wasn't in the textbook. So it wasn't something I learned about. So there's this thing I think we navigate now that people are like, oh, you're just trying to be black now because of Black Lives Matter. Oh, you just want to be black now because of George Floyd. And people are like, there's that line we have to navigate. Like maybe people didn't know about it. There's different levels of intelligence that come with this and different levels of history. So, I'm sure many of you didn't learn about a lot of this stuff in school.
No.
A lot of the black issues. So Monique, I know you're in the islands. What was the thing that taught you your Afrocentrism or about your people? Was it your parents? Was it your cousins? Like, how did you learn for yourself?
Okay, so I grew up in the Bahamas, and to be honest with you, like the history, all I remember is Arawaks, Caribs, Indians, and Christopher Columbus. To be honest, like the social studies that I remember, that's all I remember. I was talking to someone the other day, and she was just really going into the Caribbean history, which I feel a lot of us haven't been privy to. Mm-mm. But my dad is Nigerian, so I also have a Nigerian heritage. I didn't meet him until I was 8 years old, but just that journey of my own personal experiences. And the thing is, growing up in the islands, we have this thing called colorism as well. And so the whole notion of, the lighter you are, the brighter you are, the smarter you are, those things really exist everywhere. And so what we're seeing and feeling here in the US, we have it in the Caribbean too. It's just in a different form. So for me, I used to bleach my skin when I was growing up. I wanted to be lighter. I used to get the creams and put it on and, try to be a little chocolater and smoother or whatever have you. But it felt so normal because so many people were doing it. So it's like you don't even know that you are in this process of self-hate. This is what I call it. You don't even know that because all around you, it's so dysfunctional. And it's just this dysfunction is normal, if you will. But along the way, like going through my own introspective process and learning about myself, I think when I came here, I came to Atlanta and I went to the Shrine of the Black Madonna bookstore. My mom and I was there, and I met up with a group of women who founded this women's organization called the Watts, Women Aspiring Together to Succeed. And from there, I started learning more, even deeper about, the Black history here in the US. And that took me through a whole new journey, really discovering myself in newer ways and in deeper ways. But I never, like you guys said, Dr. Money and Nick, I didn't see myself in an inferior position, if you will. So when I left the islands, I moved to Minnesota. I never had to position myself as a Black woman first. I never walked with that. I never walked with that label, and I don't use it today either. So I'm a communications specialist. This is what I do. I know that I'm good at it. I know I can show up and get results. I know I deserve what I put my mind to. And so that, I think that type of mindset is what helped me. But in deepening an appreciation for myself, like that was just a whole process of me learning and then feeling more connected to my own heritage. Just having that background that, whoa, Africa ain't what they put on the screen.
Yes.
We have to challenge our beliefs, the music, the videos. So right now we're in an exciting place of awakening and alignment for people. Nick was inspired when he saw all the Black pilots, everybody who goes to Africa will be touched.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So that's something that I feel once we can tap into what's inside and rewrite the script, then we'll be able to kind of break free from some of this type of bondage or inferiority complex that has been passed down.
Perfect. Hey, you guys mute when you're not talking. I'm getting feedback from somebody.
I'd like to add something.
Go ahead.
What I'd like to add, particularly for the women on here, I know for me, I was made so uncomfortable working in white America with my hair. I was told, can I straighten it? Can I do so many different things? Can I, and for me, it was so uncomfortable. I did it to get along. Yes, I walked in as a Black woman, but as a woman first, and someone who's capable of doing the job, but I felt uncomfortableness around them. Mind you, I was around white women who had curly hair, but it was basically one of those things where, Jackie, can you please straighten your hair? I had one of my mentors tell me that as well. Can you straighten my hair? He's no longer my mentor, and and I'm never going to make someone feel comfortable when I'm feeling uncomfortable. I'm never going to do that. So I'm embracing my skin. I'm embracing my hair. If I choose to throw on a weave, that's me. I'll do whatever I want to do. But I'm never, ever going to let anyone allow me or make me feel uncomfortable because of the wonderful crown that I have ever again.
So, I want to add something to that, Jacqueline. So something that I always kind of remind myself as well is we have to learn how to be proud. See, people come out, right? Other, races, they just come out and they exude that proudness, especially for, I would say African Americans. We need to learn how to actually have the courage, and also there's nothing wrong with that, right? There's nothing wrong with loving ourselves. We don't want to come across races saying that, we enjoy being Black and we believe in, some type of, Black power, Black kind of stance, because that is who we are. We cannot take off our Blackness, right? This does not wash off. So I have to walk around with this. But I have noticed as children and even as adults, we have to learn how to love ourselves. And I think sometimes that's also, hurtful and also an eye opener for all of us. What do you all think about that? Learning to love yourself.
For 100%.
Yeah, I agree with that. One of the things that, I found myself during my corporate journey was being the only Black person in the room, because I just found myself in that way, and then also one of the youngest. So I'm one of the youngest, one of the only Black people in the room, and I came at a decision point. There was one intersection point where I tried to conform, and I shaved off my beard, so I had no facial hair, right? And I just didn't like the way I looked with that. But as a part of corporate culture, you weren't allowed to have facial hair. And so I tried even doing the whole going to the golf course thing and, et cetera. And it never felt right to me. And what I told myself, and I remember one day being in the break room saying, you know what, I can't do this, right? I'm just going to be me. And being me was having the same energy, using the vernacular that I use, not unprofessional, but it's not going to be, it's how I communicate, right? Leverage, my energy. The big thing is the energy that you bring to the room, right? And I had to make the decision that, I am good enough. And, my uniqueness, my background, my experiences is actually a benefit. It's a benefit. It's not something that was going to keep me behind, but if I lean into it, and it will allow me to stand out. And, my whole thing is getting noticed, and it allows you to do that. So, for people that are the only ones, because I know, oftentimes I hear of that. You have to be comfortable with who you are and know who you are. And at the end of the day, if you don't feel good about a situation, and if people don't want to be friends with you, then you don't need to be friends with them. You need to find an environment that's going to appreciate what it is that you bring to the table.
And I if it's okay, Daryl, I'm just gonna leave a parting message on love, because unfortunately I want to make sure that other people getting here as well. So I discovered my real love, like my superpower love, back in 2014, and that took me having to go in and rip out pain and shame and frustration and anger and jealousy and rage out of me from all of the baggage that I had carried from just, you know, my lived experiences, just not being able to let go of them in the moment and just carrying them through my entire life. And once I ripped that off and replaced all of my learnings about who I am with a place of love, I became very, very hungry to actually start to build a platform of love. And that's who I am. I walk in the superpower of love. I brought it into corporate. I brought it into tech. And anyone here that lives in tech, you know that it's pretty beige. It was very white at one time, very male, very beige. And here I am, this pop of color, speaking about love. And I think that that's important. If there's any parting message that I can leave with everybody, is there's an amazing quote that Martin Luther King speaks about, and Bishop Michael Curry took the entire world to church when he shared it at the royal wedding, was there's a power in love. There's a redemptive power of love. And when we can discover that, we'll make of this old world a new world. And I truly believe that. And, you know, somebody actually in the comments said, as a young person, you know, starting new in their career, what is your advice to us? And I would be like, own your love. And your love looks like you knowing your excellence, you knowing when you walk into a room, your skills and talents might have gone you there, but your character, that character of love, is going to keep you there and make you shine. And don't be afraid to speak from that space, you know, and just be open enough to recognize that there's a lot of power and success behind that. So, yeah. And to all of my brothers and sisters,
the mic dropper.
You guys are amazing. I do. I don't need to. I say it all the time. I don't need to know you to love you. I love you unconditionally. And so keep smashing. This is an amazing live, man. Thank you, Daryl. Yeah.
Daryl, I'm gonna pop off also to let some other
Thank you, Queen.
I appreciate you for having me, sir.
No problem. Thank you, too. So there's a question also that came in the comments real quick here. Let me find it. Here we go. So please, how do we ensure that true Black history is taught in elementary and high school? Oh, then pop on the screen. So that's a good question. How do we ensure true Black history? And Tara, thanks for joining us. We got Tara Jackson, Madam Money, jumping in here.
Hey there.
Tara, let them know who you are and what you do real quick. I didn't get a chance to introduce you.
No problem. My name is Tara Jackson, aka Madam Money. I am the author of Financial Fornication and the 4 Financial Languages. So I am one of the few, but many African Americans or people of color that's in the financial education space. Most people know about Ramsey or Susie Orman, but there are the Tiffany Budgetnistas, there are the MyFab Finances, there are the Madam Monies that are out there trying to educate the world about finances in a different lens. And that's the whole thing. Their experiences are different than ours. So one size does not fit all. We have a cultural difference. I am also the founder of an organization called Dualpreneur, which is professionals with side gigs and providing resources for them as well. So excited to be here.
Thanks for jumping in. So I want to get this question to Ramona, because Ramona is a historian, a doctor in history. So the question is, how do we ensure true Black history is taught in elementary and high school? So I'm going to let you weigh in.
Yes, I want to go to your first question first, because all of us have different experiences about how we started to embrace our Black identity. And I have a little different experience. I am from a small town called Brownwood, Texas, which is in Central Texas. And I am a product of race men and women, which is a term historians use to describe Black men and women who believe that everything they do is to better the race and uplift the race, and that everything you do represents the race. And so I grew up with a strong Black identity, and my parents actually are leaders in the movement in Texas. And so I grew up affirmed and very much grounded in my Black identity. And in school, growing up in school, I often was the only Black in my classroom. And when we got to junior high and high school, when tracking began, I wasn't tracked because of my parents. And tracking is when you put poor students or students of color in lower classrooms academically in order to, because you want to affirm that they're not smart when they are smart. Well, my parents refused to allow me to be tracked. And so I often found myself in a classroom where it was all white people. I was the only Black person in the classroom. And we didn't have Black history taught in the classroom. And so I often, when it was time to do reports, I would often do them on some type of Black experience because I could always go to my parents. There were a million books in the house. So that's how I did my research and incorporated into the learning experience for my peers until by senior year, people would roll their eyes because they knew I was going to talk about Black history of some of the sport. But it wasn't until I attended Clark Atlanta University, which is a historically Black college in Atlanta, where I began to really understand the entire Black history. Although I grew up in a where my parents, my entire family, actually, always fought the empowerment of Black and brown communities, whether it was economic, political, and social. It wasn't until I got to college that I understood the intellectual framework to use, attending the Atlanta University Center, which is the largest consortium of historically Black colleges in the world. Clark Atlanta, Morris Brown College, Morehouse College, Spelman College. And because I was able to take classes on all those campuses, it really even more affirmed who I was. And I was so happy. I'm sure many of you that attended HBCUs to have your first Black teachers, so that was it affirming as well. So going back to the question, the person asked about how do we get Black history in the schools. The issue is that racism is a systemic problem, and education in teaching the history of Black people and people of color in the history book has to be done in terms of attacking the system. And so there, like for example, in Texas, there's a movement there to get Mexican American history in the school book, in the school books, and that was a long process. And so the way we do that is by using all of our resources that we can in order to make sure that those books are included in the classroom. And then lastly, to Daryl's point about Juneteenth, I don't think that it's odd for you as a person to not know about Juneteenth, because Juneteenth is actually a Texas holiday. It wasn't until Texans moved outside of Texas that other people around the country started celebrating Juneteenth. So that's not an oddity that most people don't know what Juneteenth is. Juneteenth has been celebrated for generations in Texas.
That's excellent. I did want to share something that this is that when we realized that Blackness, because we want other people to come on. I didn't know that I grew up to be a white person until I moved to Georgia, because I didn't really see color. Because in Delaware, it's predominantly white. We're fitting in, but I didn't realize that I was culturalized until I moved to Georgia, and they taught me that I was Black. Honestly, quite frankly, and it wasn't until I moved to Georgia that I really embraced my Blackness in my space in the financial services industry. That's where I was able to move up. I was able to be my real person. I think if I still tried to be the person that I was and try to climb that corporate ladder, I wouldn't have been a CEO of a financial institution. I wouldn't have been a financial commentator, because what I'm realizing now, as much as I appreciate my Blackness, the world does too. They may not want to admit it, but Al Jazeera is looking for African-American females that can talk about financial and international finance, because it's dominated by white male voices. So they are seeking our voices. They are seeking people that look like us to provide a different perspective, because the entire world does not look like that segmented group. And so now I am embracing the fact that I'm a beautiful Black woman. I'm a smart Black woman. I'm not ashamed to say it. Even though I'm very comfortable in a boardroom full of white men, I still now really appreciate that they appreciate me for having me in the room. So I don't know if there's a lot of people out there that grew up not knowing that Black was a thing. I didn't know it was a problem until I moved really to Georgia, honestly, because I think I was sheltered in a way. And then when reality hit, my first experience of racism happened when I was in Georgia. And, you know, shout out to Georgia. I love you. But you do. I mean, when I got there, I had my customers at the credit union telling me, girl, you too white. We need to get you some soul food or do something to you. But now I appreciate my voice and I'm able to speak in my language of what I was supposed to do. I can code switch, but I have learned to embrace that. And I think that is our superpower, as they said before. Our Blackness is so much of our superpower and so wanted and needed, regardless of whether they admit it or not.
Talking about you stating in corporate America, and then there are some of us who are entrepreneurs. Like the person said before, hair is an issue. In terms of being able to navigate that space. I'm very conscious about my hair. I make decisions on when my hair is going to be straight and when it's going to be curly. But it's my decision. It's not necessarily somebody telling me that I need to do that. If it's somebody telling me to do that, then I don't necessarily need to be in that environment, because we need to be able to be ourselves wherever we go and be comfortable with our own life and our own skin and our own hair and our own culture. And so I don't know how you, in terms of deal with the whole issue of hair in corporate America, but I'm very curious about that.
I'd love to jump in.
Yeah, I want to introduce a few people I rotated in real quick. So you got Sherry Jones from Canada. We have Rhino Richard down in the ATL over there, and Christina Thomas at the bottom left. Go ahead, Shirley, you got it.
So the interesting perspective that I have is my parents are Jamaican, or my dad is born in Jamaica. I'm born in Canada. My parents had a salon for 40 years in Canada. And so I always grew up with the perspective. My dad would always tell me, one drop of black. And that's all I knew until, you start to navigate in high school, when you have to deal with colorism, and you also have to deal with racism and all that stuff. But one of the things that my dad always instilled in me was, anybody can have good hair as long as they go to the hairdresser. So that was my whole perspective on what good hair meant. Meanwhile, they did prescribe to the perm and Jerry curl kind of, this is like, we're talking 80s and 90s kind of stuff. But it's interesting now, even as we have been able as a people to really embrace what our hair looks like, especially in urban, I would say more urbanized. I'm in Toronto, so it's a very urbanized center. We're able to do that, but you still walk a fine line sometimes mentally when you're like, do I feel prettier when my hair is straight? And I still have to undo programming as to what my hair represents for me. But I think one of the awesome pieces that have been coming out lately, especially even in this conversation, is just like, I choose how I want to wear my hair. And if I want to add a $5 ponytail, I'm okay with that. Or if I want to wear my hair curly, if I want to wear my hair straight, I have to be okay with that. And sometimes it is something where it's just like, it is what it is. But while we're still choosing, that doesn't mean the other things have gone away, right? While we're embracing it more, while we see what's going on, at the same time, we still have to deal with the issue of safety around how we show up and how we represent. And safety meaning, is there going to be another opportunity for me? Safety meaning, are they going to inadvertently judge me because I look a certain way. And as an entrepreneur, I give myself more permissions, and I've worked in the corporate space, and I see, that necessary, it's still necessary, that navigation. While right now this is prime time to have these conversations where people are listening, people are more open to respecting differences and having conversations. I think the biggest opportunity for us is to make sure that we are still pushing the conversation and taking those uncomfortable moments and making sure that this is not a moment in time, that this is a momentum, that we take the momentum into a movement so that we see that change, because it is so necessary. And I just see how we, even in this prime time of having conversations about being Black, we still have those uncomfortable moments, either inwardly where we have to do the reprogramming because we've got some hardwiring that we have to reprogramming, or if it's outwardly where we're like challenging beliefs that other people may have as far as what looks professional, what has Black.
Yeah, you have some comments loving your ponytail share. People saying they love the $5 ponytail, so do it, girl.
That ponytail will work, bro. That ponytail will work.
Exactly. I love the fact that she said that we can choose. The great thing about being Black is that we have diversity and we can do many things with our hair. I love the fact, like the beautiful curly afros y'all have. I just love that. Now, I'm that chick that will wear the weave and it's going to be straight because I'm lazy. I always say that my sister is India Ivory and I'm Oprah. I'm just not that chick. I don't want to deal with my hair. But we have that right to be able to choose what we want to do, and we should not be judged based on our choice.
Right.
From our other brothers and sisters or in our family. So I love the fact that you said, it's a choice. And the fact that we have that choice, the fact that I can rock a weave that's straight, or if I decide to go natural, I can still do that and still be the same level of brilliance, regardless of time of life.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Absolutely. Because that's the thing is like, we are battling so many wars, like the same war, but so many different battles. We battle within the community because we'll have, especially like, my parents' generation. And I mean, I'm not young. I may project that way, but I am closer to 50 than I am to 40. So that being said, we deal with these, you would look so much nicer if you straighten your hair because I guess that's professional. Oh, you're going to go speak and look like that with my big curly hair when I wear my hair curly. And it's all those things that we have to recognize that we battle within the community, we battle at work, and then we battle in our heads as well. And so it's like a war on all fronts that we have to challenge. And even when we hear ourselves challenging somebody, oh, why did she wear her hair like that? Why would she go on a broadcast? I do that. And then I have to check myself. So it's that constant, there's a war there's a battle on all fronts, right? So we just have to win this war.
And I want to segue to something real quick. Christine, I'll come back to you in a second. Right now, I wanted you to weigh in on a little bit because earlier Dr. Ramona mentioned Juneteenth, and you schooled me to some Juneteenth information. You are very unapologetically Black, and you have some videos you put out there about, we've been doing Juneteenth since I was a kid, and you had pictures and all that. So for you kind of seeing this as a Black man who's grown up with it your whole life, and now it's like popularized, how do you feel that plays out in the professional world or in the business community?
I got to tell you, and I think I said this on a post or two, I have mixed feelings about it. I mean, I think like any of us would appreciate that, that there is an attention being brought to us, but in some ways the minute corporate gets involved and folks with different agendas get involved, it turns into something that it didn't start as, for those of you, I'm sure most of y'all know Juneteenth and Juneteenth origins. And, it's been something that's been largely regionalized for a reason when you understand the history of it. But I got it straight up. I'm a little bit conflicted, as a kid that grew up, and I'm originally from Ohio, but I grew up in Utah. So Juneteenth and Black History Month, all these things were very, very important to us. To this day, I have one award we're in my studio right now, but in my office, I have one award. I've won shitloads of awards over the course of my career. I have one award that sits in my office, and I won it in 1995, and it was a Role Model of the Year award for Black History Month. 1995. But that's how important these things were to us. And you know, you had Nick on earlier, and I'm sure already Nick and I have had some conversations about just the evolution of all this, and you know what's going on right now, and kind of how we're in vogue in some respect, which is a little weird for me. It's I'm used to being on the outside, but you know the biggest concern I think that I have, and I think we all share, is that this does not end with where, you know, we don't want to be in vogue. We want to invoke change. We want things to change. And so I'm having a lot of conversations, and I'm going to be straight up with y'all right now. One of the conversations that I'm having with a lot of people is I'm sharing my experience, and I've been doing this. I'm sharing my experience because, you know, a lot of us, there's a big push for education and feeling that, you know, folks that are not in our community need to educate themselves, right? And yeah, but it's also incumbent upon us to be the ones that educate them, which is hard. It's hard for me. I went through a couple of a whole lot of emotion, and we don't want to talk about this stuff. And I applaud you, Daryl, and everyone that's on this platform, because one thing I want people to understand as they're watching this, we don't want to talk about this stuff by and large. It's trauma. But I applaud all of y'all for showing leadership and being willing to go out there and talk about it, because we can't expect people to learn and people to do better unless we help them, unless we teach. So this is what it's going to take, the leaders that are on this to continue to lead. And I don't know about y'all. I do know about y'all because y'all doing it, but I'm 100%. I'm on 100. Like, this is just the beginning. Doesn't stop.
Yeah. I love that. And Christina, I don't want to cut you off earlier. So Christina, I want you to add to that, or the point you was going to make, maybe about something else.
So it was definitely about something else, but making sure, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. But I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to go back to what Cher was talking about the programming that we have based upon. So it's been my experience that I was pretty much raised in Alaska and then came to Maryland. And that's kind of where I came into, oh, we different, you know? So it was that wake up call for me of just like, oh, okay, all right.
We lose sound.
When she comes back, I have a question around that, because I heard that, and I heard something before about not being. I grew up in, you know, 1% Black population. I knew I was different, like from the jump. So I'm curious. People say like, okay, they grew up in those environments and they got around Black people and experienced real racism. I saw lots of racism. So I'm really curious to hear about that.
It depends on where you're located, where you live. But Christina, go ahead and finish up, and then I can really explain that one.
Yeah, so that's what mine was. Okay, my hair wasn't, you know, but my hair was too straight, or my hair was curly, and it wasn't the texture of it. You're not Black, and the way that you talk, you're too light skinned. And it was like I couldn't fit in with the white people, I couldn't fit in with the Black people. You know, the Hispanics were like, you ain't us because you're not speaking Spanish. So, you know, I didn't know what to do. But how we are programmed, and I've seen that. I've seen how it's been in the corporate world. I've seen other people that I worked under as well. But in the part of Maryland that I'm in, I see Black faces all the time. You know, when you're seeing people rolling up in Bentleys, guess what? They're Black. So it was a great experience for me to see, oh, we're doing it here. You know, PG County, yes. But when I got into the corporate environment and I was working under those, you know, Black women, it was like we would do this. because they were afraid of, okay, don't come for my job. You stay in your lane and you help yourself. I built myself up all the way up here, and you got to do the same thing for you. And I understand why they would feel this way because of that programming that you were talking about, Cher. But how can we, because we've got these outside forces that are working against us, but then we also have interior forces that are working against us. So just coming together and just like, honey, my thing is like, we're not in competition, baby. If I try to be you, I would lose every day. And if you try to be me, you would do the same. Nobody can be me. And I can't be you, and I don't want to. So let's just stay in our lane, but we can still help each other reach the level that we should. If I've got something, if I'm up here and I know that I can help you, I can help you. I'm not in fear of you taking what I have. What God has for me is for me, sweetie. So I just being able to rewire our programming and just knowing, not taking how we've been treated and what people have said about us and how they demean us and and whatever, and taking that internally and now spewing that out to our people. So just stopping that. So how can we better that and reprogram?
Right. Even like for me, as a hey everybody, Dr. Kim.
Hey Kim.
Hey, I'm from up north. I grew up in New Jersey, right outside New York, and my grandmother made sure that she instilled in me that you are beautiful, because I'm dark. As you can see, I was a darkness, so I was tar baby, blacky. Oh, I can't see you. You better smile when we turn the lights off. Our people were cruel. I mean, it was some cruel things said as a youngster, and I thank God for my grandmother keeping instilling me, you're beautiful. Don't let that bother you. Teaching me to have that tough skin. I started getting into pageants where I'm the only black. So that they want to look and feel and see. I was the only black girl.
Don't touch my hair. Don't touch it.
They want to know and be all in the mix of things. You know what I'm saying? So you're right. As within our own people, there's a lot of things where we're cruel and to each other, right? And we don't treat each other right. But we have to change that for the next generation. We have to love one another. We have to come together. We have to have that collaboration and that connection with these young girls to let them know, look, we're all in this together. We hear that all the time now, but we really are. And you have to support and love your sister. If I had just allowed everything that was going on around me to define me, I wouldn't be where I am today. I wouldn't have been able to kind of have that tough skin, to have self-confidence, to have the security that I have about loving who I am. I am black. Look, when I walk in a room, I'm black. My name is Kim. I am black. Okay?
But that's true.
I am black. Period.
But that's why, and Tara, when you said that phrase, like not seeing color, like I want to make sure people watching this that when it's a different thing when we say that, I think, than when white people say that. Like, I don't see color. I feel like it's different. I might be wrong because I'm black and I've heard that, but I feel like it's different when we say it versus when they say it, because it's obvious.
It's so different. It's not that I didn't notice that I'm black and they're white. In my environment where I lived, the racism may have been very covert, right? It was very blatant. I didn't feel blatant racism until I moved to Georgia, where they didn't care. They knew they were racist. They wanted to be racist. They wanted you to know that they were racist.
That's right.
Where I came from, they may have said it behind closed doors. They may have said it behind the face, but in front of us, it was kumbaya. We're friends. We're brothers, and all of this. So, like I said, I could have been sheltered in that, but that's where I learned how to deal with my white counterparts. That's how I felt. I learned how to feel comfortable in a boardroom where I was not only the only African American, but I was the only woman in the room. So imagine having to deal with that. And it was a white male that taught me how to maneuver in those situations. And I knew when I went to Georgia, I wanted to go to Georgia. I want to be around my people. It wasn't until I was around my people that my people put me in check.
That's right. They sure did.
That was the strongest and probably the most painful reality check I ever experienced, because they'll tell me, girl, take that white, that whiteness out of here, or they'll be real. They came in my office and cussed me out. I didn't know you could do that.
Well, that leads to an interesting segue then, because Ronell, I want to have you weigh in on this. We had a comment from somebody saying, how do Black people and other minorities not become overwhelmed with all the uncovered excellent Black history to feel comfortable having the discussion? So there's so much information now, like Google's been around for a while, so it's not new, but all this information is new. So for you, Ronell, for someone that's been through a lot of history, a lot of information, like how do people that aren't there, that haven't read the history, how do they get comfortable with talking in these discussions, whether they know or don't know?
I'm a little confused on that question. Break that down.
So basically, for people that they're not woke as you, for example, and they want to have a conversation about what's going on right now with being Black in America and everything, what should they do to get comfortable in those circles so they don't feel like they got to be the historian, but they can actually say something positive for the conversation?
Are we talking about other Black people?
Yeah, other Black people and minorities.
I already know they Black. What? Okay, I'm with you.
Go ahead, Ron. Now.
So I'm going to say it starts with educating ourselves. Even the knowledge that I dropped about Juneteenth, most Black folks didn't know that. Like, there are people celebrating Juneteenth on this past year that they had no clue what Juneteenth even was a week, 2 weeks before it. So, it starts with educating ourselves, and it's not being afraid to have these conversations. I had a conversation 2-3 weeks ago with a couple of folks who we're on opposite ends of the political spectrum, and that influences some of this stuff that we're talking about. But we were able to sit down and have a civil conversation and just kind of try to see things from others' perspective. I think one of the beautiful things that I've seen that's come from what we've been through these last couple of months is that people on the other side are like, we can all agree that shit that happened, that wasn't right. Like, that's bad. And so that has created a catalyst where we can sit down, and as long as we can all take ourselves out of this stuff, some of this stuff emotionally, and just talk and educate. One of the biggest things for me, motivations and why I'm standing up and I won't shut my mouth, is because people think I'm different. They think I'm different. When I sat down with these two folks, and they're tremendous people, and really enjoyed our conversation, but they said to me, when we saw the stuff going on, we didn't think of you. We didn't think, oh, that affects you, or you could be one of those people. And it's not because it's just they didn't see that as being something that affects someone of whatever you want to say, my stature, my accomplishments, or whatever. And these folks, I love them to death, and I coach them. And they've hired me to coach them, right? But they didn't see me as someone that would be affected by these things. So I think to answer that question, for one, we got to get educated ourselves, man. We got to get educated, take the time to learn this stuff before we want to start having these conversations. And then when we have these conversations, let's just try to share and take some of this emotion out of it. Yeah, I understand it's very emotional. I get it. But if we're going to really create the change that we want to see, we've got to be able to articulate things in a way to where people can understand, and then listen to them. Listen to them too.
Because one of the things that I've been telling people lately, because I've been on a few shows talking about this, and as we are asking people to check their privilege, we also have to check our judgment because of where they are at in the process of being woke. A lot of people are just rubbing the sleep out of their eyes when it comes to being aware, and they don't know how to approach the question. And some people, you know the difference when someone's coming at you with a genuine curiosity and interest. It's like, I have never seen this before. Whereas someone's just kind of like poking the bear to have an uncomfortable conversation, which they want to ensure stays uncomfortable. We know that. But one of the things that Ronell just said is around doing the education piece, because a lot of things, quite frankly, we don't know. We don't know how to best articulate that. There are better ways to articulate privilege than not. And privilege is a spectrum. Privilege is not just black and white. Privilege is a spectrum. And when we can apply how to explain privilege in such a way where people can get it, we have more effective conversations. So what that means is for those, and then the burden is not on everybody, because everybody does not have the mental capacity to have these conversations. Some people are right now trying to put food on the table, and they can't take that on, and they don't feel safe. And safe is a word that I've been using a lot because of the fact not everybody feels safe to have this conversation.
Daryl, I just want to add to that, and then I'm gonna hop off so other people can come on. One of the things.
Okay.
Yeah, there's people. One of the things.
Okay. Everybody muting so you can go on.
Okay.
Everybody muting so you can go on.
Okay, one of the things that I love what he said, we have to educate ourselves on this process of our history, of other people's history. Because it is, there's some people, I had a young lady, a white young lady that wanted to interview me. She was like, Tara, I'm saying this in the most generous way. How do you want to be presented? As African-American, as Black? I don't know, because some people get offended if I say African-American, get Black. And they're coming from a genuine space because they want to have the conversation, but they don't want to feel attacked. So just, like she said, just appreciate from where they're coming from and help them, because some people just don't get it. The other thing, as I exit, is understand when I'm having those difficult conversations, I have to remind some of my white immigrants, or excuse me, my white counterparts, that they are immigrants to this country. And the fact that they hate immigrants or want to send immigrants where they came from, my response is you first, because their forefathers were more than likely immigrants to this land. And unless we are having a conversation with indigenous, everyone is an immigrant to this country. And so when we understand the history, not only just ours, but the history of where we are, we can start having some debates and difficult conversations. I don't necessarily take it personal, but I will take it intellectual. I will take offense intellectually if you don't know what you're talking about and you're trying to have a debate with me. And on that, you're absolutely fabulous and gorgeous and beautiful. Thank you so much, Daryl, for having this platform. And I'm going to continue to watch. I just want other people to be able to come on. Hope we all can.
Thank you so much. Marlon, if you're in the comments, I see you in the comments. Jump on, Marlon. But thanks, Queen. Now, Pierre, I wanted you to weigh in on that part she ended with, because you do leadership all the time. And with this going on, leadership's a big thing with this. How to, go ahead and mute yourself for a second. You get the feedback. Mute yourself for a second. You get the the leadership of this is a challenge, because some of the leadership, let's be frank, is older white males or people that haven't dealt with this. So as this needs to be put into the people, there's a leadership issue. So talk a little bit about the leadership, or how you see this, or how we make this more of a movement and not just a moment.
Well, that was great, and I'm glad, Chair Jamaican, you pull it out. I'm glad you bring it up, because I'm telling you, one of the things that with Kim and I, my wife and I, we talk about is the fact that we had to have that. We were sitting in the bed, and the little boy was playing with his gun, and he got murdered, right? And we started crying, and we're literally looking at the TV screen. But white people don't have to have that type of conversation with their spouse, so that's what makes us different. And not only that, when you have those types of conversations with them, guess what? Now the white privilege goes into their subconscious mind. It makes them understand, so they're not hearing white privilege, because it's like, white privilege is like, I play football, so I'm really athletic. So if you say, oh, because you play football, you have the opportunity to do such and such. No, I got the opportunity because of my knowledge and wisdom and learning and all those kinds of things. You can't just place it just because I'm athletic. It gives me an open door to get into different places. So getting back to specifically how we help our white brothers and sisters is we talk about our experiences. Like literally, in my neighborhood. I have to literally say to my son, no, you can't run all the way down the street without me seeing you where you are. You know, we worry about those things. I am not going to go in the new homes that are being built right down the street. And so these types of conversations are what I'm having with my clients, the different clients that I have, and they're called courageous conversations. And in these courageous conversations, we're literally bringing up the fact that, hey, you know, I can't run around in a black hoodie. Yeah, I can, and I can do what I want to do, but I have to be cognizant. I have to be self-aware of the things that I do, rather than the fact that you can't. You necessarily don't have to do it. You can walk around the neighborhood with a bear in your hand.
Right. You know, and
go ahead, Doc.
I want to jump in because I'm a mother of 4 Black sons. Okay, so believe you me, the conversations I've had to have with all of my boys, all right, from how you got to present yourself, what you need to look like, how you got to go do this, when it's time to drive. I was afraid when my son got his first car. My oldest son got a car and had to drive. I didn't know, boy, oh boy, you know, I didn't want people in the car. I wanted him to get a pickup truck with just 2 seats, so he couldn't ride nobody around, so he wouldn't be racially profiled and pulled over because there's a bunch of them in the car. You know, they don't know. They just see a bunch of people in the car, and they, you know, black boys, and they just want to stop them. But I had to get over that fear. I had to just communicate and teach them and tell them all the things that we know our white friends didn't have to do or go through, or they didn't understand all that. And even my youngest son right now, who lives and he lives out of state, for all of them out of state, but lives in Miami. You know, I'm constantly, you know, checking on him. You all right? You good? What's going on? You know, we got the pandemic. Are you staying in? You know, still doing those motherly things. But when that phone rings at night, my heart drops every time. Even if they call me, my son called me right now. My first response is always, "What's wrong? What you need? Is everything okay?" I'm just checking in. I'm just trying to check on you. Are you good? I'm like, oh, okay, I'm all right. But again, you know, as you were saying, is with your son, we worry about our kids, you know, the way they look and how they dress. You know what I mean? My son wanted to twist his hair and do the braid thing, and I was like, I want you to be who you are and do the things that you want to do, but I'm thinking about the other side of what you're going to look like. So I don't want you to braid your hair. I don't want you to do that, because you're going to be you're going to be put in a certain category. Now they're going to racially profile. You go to the store and you're going to automatically look at it in a certain way. So I didn't want them to do that. And they kind of went through the phase, but I always kept saying, nope, I don't like it. I always would say I don't like it. And I was like, dang, am I wrong for this? Am I not allowing them to be truly who they want to be? But I know on the other side, it's gonna hurt. It's gonna keep them from being able to excel and go forward and move on to do the things, because people are gonna see them on the outside. They're not gonna know what's in here, what's in their heart. They're just gonna see the outside appearance, and that's it. Oh no, you ain't good. I'm gonna let you roll, you know, and that's not good. So, you know, I just want to say this last thing, because I'm gonna jump off. And I Googled while you were talking, Darryl. You said something about, we were talking about Black people, and it said here, what is the real meaning of Black? Black is associated with power, fear, mystery, strength, elegance, authority, death, evil, rebellion, aggression, and sophistication. All that is what we're going through right now.
Yeah.
Thing that's going on right now. Okay. So look, I love my Blackness. I love my Black people. I'm not going to stop. And hey, ain't nothing you can do about it.
Mic drop. There we go.
It was great,
Thanks,
guys.
Kim.
Share
I'm
something.
gonna be chiming in, but I'm gonna do some work now. I love you all.
All right. Thanks, Kim.
All right.
I want to share something just on the heels of what Kim said, because just from a parent perspective, you know, I have 2 boys, and yeah, you know, I do feel the same way in terms of understanding how to prepare them for the future. But on the flip side, I chose not to do any of that with my boys. Because when we say we're talking about self-love, and, you know, when we're hearing all of those things, and we're allowing our language to demonstrate the fear, by the very nature of doing that, we already put it into their mind that, okay, who they are is not good enough. So several of us have talked about, you know, making sure that we love ourselves and who we are is good enough, but we say that with our words, but our emotions and our feelings and our actions aren't really demonstrating that. So imagine how difficult it is for our kids to hear this sort of seesaw type of message. Now, I did the opposite. Was it the right one? I don't know. We don't know. We do the best we can with the information that we have. But when we become aware, we could choose different things and have different choices. But as a result of me not saying, you can't do that, you got to watch out for this, you got to do that, they started to grow up with a different sense of identity. And so we talked about, when was it that we stepped into our Blackness, or when was it that we finally became aware that, Blackness was great or Blackness was elegance. And we all came to different points of that or journeys. But the key about it, I feel, is us being able to share the power in who you are as a person. And as Black people, or people who are professionals, we have the responsibility first to go inside ourselves and really uncover not just the negative aspects, but we have to reshape that whole exposure. Ramona, you went to the HBCUs. That's a very, very affirming environment. You know what I mean? Jamaica is in a place of its own. So if you have the Jamaican history, I mean, really, that's a different type of rooting and seeding and planting. So for those that don't have that exposure, I remember I read a book. John Eves wrote this book, The Morehouse Mystique, because I wanted to really uncover what was it about these Morehouse men that they had so much confidence in who they were as a person. And it was that education. It was that exposure. It's what you put up on the wall. It's the music that you listen to, how you talk about certain situations. Now, when I did it with my boys, of course, sometimes it got to a point where I was like, well, did I not do the right thing? Because now they don't see that. They don't see that they need to be afraid. And do they really need to be afraid? I mean, which one do we really want to choose? So I think as a parent, just thinking about how we can go with it ourselves and do that reprogramming, or even making sure that if it's not in the school system, go to the alternative right now. Go and find yourself alternative books, find yourself alternative movies. You are the one that is in control of the brainwashing. It's in the mind. Whoever gets to the mind first wins. And even though we have so many things coming up against us, this is the action that we could take right now. So that's my thought on the parenting aspect. And then on the corporate side, I've been in corporate. I've heard things. There are things that we see where we have I think Tara was talking about coming to Georgia and people were all up in your face and all of that other stuff.
Yep.
So we know that piece of the racism, but there's a lot of covert. Is the covert better than the blatant? We're not doing if it's better. It exists. I've been in business situations where I have a lot of friends who are white, and I've had these conversations prior to all of these experiences. And sometimes I stepped into a room, I moved into a conversation, pursuing a business deal, not even knowing or thinking that racism was present until one of my white male friends would be like, you know what? This guy don't like Black people. Ain't nothing happening. So you have to have people in your corner, Black and white, who are genuine and who care about you. But it is not, my belief is it's not your responsibility to be educating anybody, because we're educating ourselves. We can learn together. I don't have to put my grief on the shelf. And because you're ready to have a conversation, I need to now come ahead and have this conversation with you. So I'm committed to supporting Black people and helping them to rediscover the power of their origin, the connection to the beauty of Africa, because I know once you learn that history, you feel empowered. You have a choice. A lot of white people are going through learning about the history because some were brainwashed just like us, romanticized about what slavery was. We have to acknowledge, but when they learn about that, they feel shame. So they start to shrink. So these are the emotions. And when you feel shame and shrinking, what are you going to do? You're going to deny it. No, that ain't me. No, it don't exist.
Yeah.
You're going to get into all of that stuff. Right. So you have to know how these emotions are influencing the responses. And if we really want to have that movement to have a conversation, like you said, sharing the stories. If they're genuine, if they're curious, share the stories. But you have to have the boundaries within yourself. If you're not ready to have that, if you're moving through trauma, say, I can't have that right now. I'm operating at full capacity. I can't have this conversation right now. Those of us that can speak will speak. If you can't speak, don't feel obligated. You don't have to be responsible for educating anybody, but I encourage you to educate yourself.
I say that's something interesting Ronell had to help me with. And I know you got to jump off probably soon, Ronell. He had to teach me because I was getting in these fights with people on LinkedIn where I would see somebody comment something blatantly racist out of nowhere on a black woman's post, white male black woman's post. And I jump in like, not on my watch while I'm watching it. And Ronell had to like, hey, this is stupid. You're giving them access to your network. They're getting exposure on your feed and all that. So Ronell, thank you for teaching me that because I was up midnight every day doing that sometimes.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I wanted to.
Before I pop off, one thing I want to leave with, and Monique, I can certainly, I got mad respect for you, and I can certainly appreciate your perspective, and I think we're all as parents, we kind of do the best that we can to prepare our kids to be successful in life. Here are the realities of my life. 2 years ago, I'm driving around the corner from my office. I am pulled over by 6 officers as I'm driving a Maserati. 6 officers I'm pulled over with. 2 years prior to that, I am in the back of a police cruiser as I am driving across country on a family trip with my family. Okay. Apparently I was 15 miles over the speed limit. That's what my ticket was for. I got pulled out. I'm put in the back of that cruiser while he checked everything he could possibly check, right? I didn't go to jail, thank God. These are 2 of multitudes of experiences that I've had. And the more successful you are, the bigger target you are. I have as much confidence as a black man can have because that's how my parents raised me. I am the descendants of kings and queens of Africa that I know because their pictures were all around the house. Confidence is something I did not lack. And it's something that my children did not lack. However, I had to prepare them for the realities of this world. Those are the realities that I've had to deal with. So when I take my son out and I take him to the car and I role play with him in the car, not in the house, in the car, I role play and I walk up to him as though I'm the police officer and I tell him every ugly thing that I've heard, things that have happened to me, or I've been pulled out of a vehicle checked for track marks, stupid shit, because I am preparing him for the realities of the world. I don't want him to be afraid, but he should be to a certain extent, because if he doesn't handle that the right way, he may not come home. And I'm not just talking to, yes, obviously the very worst can happen. We've seen that and we continue to see that. But I understand that the way he handles it and the way that I handled those situations where they essentially treated me like less than a man is what determined whether I was going to go home or potentially go to jail for some BS. That's what happens. That's the reality. Hopefully we're all doing our part to change that. But I just wanted to make sure that as Dr. Kim had expressed her fears and everything, and to Monique's point and how you've educated your kids and how we don't want them to be fearful. Yeah, I don't want my son to be fearful, but it's a reality. It's a reality that I don't want to hide from him, because I don't know that he has, if I don't do my job, and I think it's a different perspective when you're coming from a father, right? Pierre, Daryl, y'all probably, Marlon, my man, what's happening, Marlon? Y'all can share from a black man where we've experienced these things, and we know that they're realities for our kids. Anyway, this has been phenomenal. Thank y'all all for sharing and being vulnerable. Like Daryl, thanks for coordinating this and allowing me a couple minutes to say my thing. I'm always going. Anytime we have the opportunity to come out there and share our stories, I'm always down. So that goes for any of y'all. Any of y'all doing something, I'm in.
Thanks, Ronell.
I wanted to jump in really quickly.
Yeah, go, Dr.
Is that
Rashonda.
possible? So I wanted to be careful because when I was growing up, I was told that I could do anything. So when people hear a woman, they think of a white woman. When they hear of a Black person, they think of a Black man. Us Black women are just, everyone knows we could do anything. We can handle anything. We could, work out at 6 a.m., transform, crush it all day, take care of our kids, do everything and still have a smile on our face. And a lot of times, the burden that is placed by everyone on us is overlooked. So I understand that we as Black women often are treated a bit differently, but it's also not fair to always assume that we could do it all without, the same level of support, care, and compassion. We've been taught this. We're strong, but it's not necessarily on us to always feel that we have to be strong no matter what. So I just want to share that with you, because whenever I say, hey, I'm going through something. So yeah, I had 9 tumors removed 6 weeks ago, and everyone's like, oh, you got it. Like, no, this is a big deal. Like, I had to go to physical therapy. This is my first week getting it back together, and people just assume, oh, Rashana got it, right? And it was really hard for me to say, like, no, I need people to, check in on me, care for me. I'm not a superwoman. And so I just think that really needs to, be included in the experience.
I want to go back to something that we said a little bit earlier. I'm hearing feedback. I want to make sure it's okay. There we go. So I want to go back to something we said a little bit earlier. I really want us to parse out the difference between raising our kids to be afraid versus raising our kids to be cautious. So, for example, my family, we're a little bit country, and Monique, my father's from St. Mary's Parish in Jamaica. So trust me, I know. But we keep bees. And what I know as a beekeeper is that bees sting. We're not afraid of the bees. We're cautious of what they're able to do. And so I'm raising my kids with that same mentality. I'm not teaching them to be afraid of anything. I'm teaching them to be cautious about what people have the ability to do. So when my son is learning how to drive or my daughter's going out into the world, I'm teaching them, here is what people are capable of doing. Here's what they are able to do, and here's how you guard yourself, even down to teaching. My husband's a martial artist. He has black belts and things like that, teaching them the art of self-defense. And so we have to teach our kids to be empowered. And yes, you descend from kings and queens, but also there is an element out here that may have an intent to harm you. And while I don't need for you to be afraid, because afraid people don't respond well when confronted, they respond differently and not strategically. I do want you to respond cautiously and be cautious when you approach these situations. The same is true as an HR professional in the work world. Everyone is not out here to harm you. I'm a professor at Mercy University, and I teach my students Black, white, Latino, Asian, everyone. But you're walking into a world where you have to be cautious. Everyone is not on your side. And so you have to be mindful of what you're doing in an interview. You have to be mindful of your presentation. Listen, I am a Black female with locks, and I went natural before it was popular in 1995. Trust me, when I was graduating, my professors came to me and said, so what you gonna do with your hair? And I'm like, I'm gonna do this. This is what we're gonna do. But they prepared me to be cautious about what that representation was going to look like when I went into the workforce, and being prepared for what that looks like. So while I want us to make sure our kids are not being raised afraid and fearful, because afraid people don't respond strategically, I do want us to make sure that our children are being raised to be cautious and mindful, so that when they are confronted or placed in that situation, they can respond strategically.
And you know what? Can I just jump in for just a second? I love what you just said. And I'm just going to share a little bit, and then I'm going to jump off, because I'm not quite sure if we have enough room for enough more people to jump in or not. My comments are blurry. So just so you know, Daryl, that's the only reason why I haven't jumped off. So I'm going to share this. We're in a state of education, education, education is key. Everything is about education. But truly, we should be also talking about the gifting that was given to each human being. Every single human being, whether you're Black, white, Latino, whatever color you are, every human being is born with a gift. And that gifting allows you to know where your purpose is in life. And see, the challenge that we have, the people that are oppressing Black people is they don't understand their gifting, they don't understand their value. And the reason why I'm talking like this is because these are the types of conversations, including what y'all just said, they need to hear, because we are working in corporate spaces where people are given authority, either a badge, a gun, or a position, vice president, CEO, but they have not been empowered. And that's what we're lacking. We're lacking empowerment in these different spaces all across every industry. People aren't empowered. People don't understand their value. And the way I define value is your talents, your gifts, and your strengths. And none of these things can be taken away from you. You could lose a job, but you cannot take away your talent, your gift, your strength, Brother Marlon. You see what I'm saying? Right? So I just wanted to make sure I share that before I jump off, because Daryl, like I said, I don't know how many we can have on, and I just realized that how many people jumped off. So God bless everybody. Man, this was wonderful. I'm ready for the next one. So God bless.
All right, hey, that's where I forgot who said it. Courtney was like, we should do this once a month.
Let's go.
But thanks, Pierre. So I want to introduce some other people we added in real quick. We got my birthday brother, Benji Nunn. We share a birthday, full disclosure. We're the same as that birthday. Somehow that happened. Went to college together.
Somehow, right?
Marlon, Mr. Family Friendly Nuggets. Good to see you, brother.
What's going on?
And Michelle Taylor Willis, my big sister with everything. So I wanted to break, and Dr. Armani's back. Dr. Armani, we're playing with Tech Challenge, getting this thing working. You guys are breaking the internet. People in the comments. If I don't get to a comment, there's a bunch of them. They're coming from YouTube and LinkedIn. We will come back to them later. Thank you so much. Something I want to make sure we hit on. This is a big issue. We talk about parenting. And Marlon, I want to have you weigh in on this a little bit. As we're teaching this whole Black Lives Matter movement, there's a lot of polarization with Black Lives Matter that white people don't get, I think, sometimes, and some Black people don't get. So Black Lives Matter, you get a common phrase, well, all lives matter. All lives matter. And yes, that's true, but there's a piece to this that I think people are missing that they want to hear from the Black perspective. So I want to, Marlon, maybe start out with this. When you hear people with all lives matter, just so people understand what that means, how do you feel about the phrase all lives matter in the wake of what we're dealing with?
So let me first say, Daryl, I'm enjoying this. I'm getting enlightened. I told you in the comments, I almost didn't come on so I could just keep listening, just getting that. It's real, man. It's extremely positive, and I'm just learning and getting those nuggets. But to your direct question, I'll share a story. Maybe that'll put some context around it, and then we can talk a little more about it. So my wife is a Marsha. She's a math teacher, right? High school math teacher. Well, she teaches middle school now. So she left her previous place of employment. We filed a civil rights lawsuit, right? It was settled. We won, right? Nobody wins in those situations. So she was called the N-word by a student, and she was also called the C-word that rhymes with hunt, right? Addison should kill herself. Addison should die. My grandfather's in the KKK, right? So my wife, even in that moment, saw that young lady who was white needed help. She didn't react. She thought about it, right? And I heard someone say, be aware, be cautious, don't be afraid. And she wasn't afraid in that moment. So me, I would have handled it completely different, just being candid about it, right? She did not. And when somebody says all lives matter, typically they're not in the situation as I just described, number one, right? Number two, my wife handled it as if I would want a police officer or another teacher to handle that situation, right? You're trained in certain situations and you're overreacting. You should be, even if someone quote unquote disrespects you, doesn't give you the right to take someone's life. Someone can be wrong, right? And there's levels to it. So my point is, when I hear all lives matter, we can have a conversation if I feel like it, right? In this discussion, we can have a conversation. I don't mind at all. But don't interrupt me while I'm at the grocery shopping and you want to have a 15, 20-minute conversation about why all lives matter or what you did in the Black community. No, it's a time and place. So concerning my bride, my wife, she handled that and she left that school. But the point is, all lives matter. The administrators are still there, right? The same ones that didn't do anything about it. The certain police officers were there when she asked for an escort and they did not give it to her, right? They're still there. So she's gone and that pain was inflicted upon her Black life. But again, all lives matter, right? So of course they do, But and you guys have heard this analogy prior. If my house is on fire, let the fire department come to my house, right? Your house is important, but it's not on fire. I need that water hose. I need someone to like douse these flames. So again, we can have a conversation about it, but it's how we approach it and how they approach us. And just remember, everybody's going through something every day, right? Everybody's going through something. It may not have been as dramatic and as impactful as what happened to my wife, all right, and because I support her, right? And we just need to know before those words are issued out of our mouths. What is your point? What kind of response are you trying to get? So I'll park it there.
Softball, who wants it?
I wanted to say something. One of the things that's quite evident in this conversation, which our audience has to understand, is that we come from a very diverse community with diverse experiences. Yes, there are some themes that run throughout all of our experiences. So we're rural, we're urban, we're from other countries, we're Afro, Latino, we're all these different identities. And one of the things we've been talking about is intersectionality, about how we come into the workspace with different identities. You heard several of us as women, we come in not only as Black people, but we come in with women as women, and we make our decisions on how we're going to navigate our work experiences according to our own personal experiences. And, we've talked about these things that go on in a racist structure, such as these covert actions of racism, as well as the microaggressions, which are those little things that happen, things that people say or they do on the fly, whether they're conscious or unconscious of it, they do it. For example, yes, I have a PhD, but most people, many times when I'm in certain environments, people ask me, well, where did you get your PhD from? And I know what they're saying. I want to see how legitimate you are, because we have these tiers of where your degrees come from. And so I do agree with Monique. It all boils down to education. Not only education about how we see ourselves. Many of us have talked about our self-esteem and when and how we claimed our Blackness. And yes, Morehouse is a great example. I'm a former professor at Morehouse, and I always say it's a sacred place and space to my students, because every week in chapel, it was honed in in the young men there of what it means to be a Morehouse man. So, yes, education in terms of self-esteem, but you also have education in that many people want to undo these racist systems and structures, and they want to know from us as Black people, whether we know our history or not, what can I do? And so many times, although many times people back away from those conversations because they feel uncomfortable, we still have to provide tools to help people out when they do have good intentions. So with that being said, I would like to recommend a couple of books. White Fragility is one book that I'd like to recommend to the audiences who want to kind of deal with the whole internal conflict they have about talking about racism and race and racial structures. And then Ibram Kendi's book, How to Be an Anti-Racist. And so with all of somebody mentioned before, all hands have to be on deck in order to dismantle racism and racial structures and oppressive structures. And the only way to do it is if all of us are there, so that we don't have to have these discussions about how we navigate through our individual professional lives just because we're Black people and the other identities we bring to the table. Well, with that being
good comment.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I would throw a good comment for Diana had for Marlon. Says, sorry to hear about your wife's encounter, but love the way you handled the situation. Like you, I'm not sure it would have been so calm. I love your continued support for your wife. Thank you, Diana. And to bring this up,
so somebody else can get in. So I'm gonna jump off. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ramona. No problem. I want to segue Michelle into this because you always say you're a boy mom. So with everything going on with this, much to what Renelle was speaking of and Monique was spoken of, you have perspective as well. You have, I think, four boys.
I do. Yeah.
For you, what is this like for you being a professional and you have, you got to be in a boardroom or something like that, and there's the code switching that goes on. You get a code switch in the boardroom, but in the back of your mind, some of these people might be aggressors against your 4 sons.
Yeah, so it's interesting, the code switch thing, which, and just a little bit about my background. I was raised pretty much in a white environment until I don't know if I really got all the way black until I pledged AKA at the University of Florida, right? But I was the only black that did pretty much everything. The only black in the AP classes, the only black on the cheerleading squad. I was the black in student government. And so that was my reality, right? And so I think, although I was eventually accepted into, the black cool circles, I really didn't understand what being black meant outside of my mom. My mom was like, we had to watch Roots every summer. Can you imagine that? Like
every summer?
I'm not even kidding. Every summer we watched Roots. We had to watch the MLK story. We had to watch that. And so it was interesting because I got both sides of the coin, right? I knew what it was like to be black, but I could navigate like a pro amongst white circles. And so the code switch thing hasn't necessarily been a thing for me. I've been able to really kind of be, myself all the time. And I really have never, published, so to speak, this representative, which probably is good and bad, right? So when I'm in a boardroom, whether I'm in a group of all blacks, which I absolutely could be now, or I could be in a group of nothing but white men, I'm completely comfortable either way. My vernacular may or may not switch. But I'm pretty much the same person all the time. And I think for people who engage with me regularly or singularly would probably agree with that. So that's that piece. But from a parenting perspective, yeah, I have 4 boys and they are all black, right? Although my husband has gotten the question, is your wife white? Because sometimes they see my kids and they hear me, right? And so they're just not sure exactly which way to go with that. It's unfortunate because the conversations I'm having with my kids from 21 to 9 is I think someone made the point earlier, it's kind of this cautiousness approach, right? I don't want to raise my children to be scared. I don't want to raise them in fear, but I do want to raise them in order for them to bring their black asses home at night. That means, it is what it is. And that means when you get encountered, or if you have an encounter, then that means you need to act accordingly. Is it fair? It's not. Is it cool? It's not. But guess what? All lives don't matter. They don't. If they did, we wouldn't be having any of these discussions. Am I right? Or am I right?
Yeah.
So, my kids know, they're very aware. Even my 9-year-old, who's going on 4, is very aware of the fact that they need to be, their radar is up and their antennas are up consistently. They don't like it. They don't really understand it and they can't internalize it. But I don't let my kids run in the neighborhood by themselves anymore. I don't let them walk to the store, which I used to do. Even when they're, together, I don't let them do certain things because I am a little fearful of whether or not they could end up shot like the other, the 9-year-olds and the 8-year-olds around the country. They could end up in jail unnecessarily. They could end up pulled over for something stupid. That's the world we live in. So, they're not scared, but they're aware. And that's what I need, a level of awareness for them so that they don't end up trying to be a hero.
I like that. And I want to bring Benji, I call him BJ, his old college nickname. But you and I were talking about this navigating this because you and I both went through HBCU together. So we had that black experience. But then when you come out of it, you go into corporate and you want to go work a job and start a business and all, then you still got to keep on your code switching stuff to be strong, to have that phone call sound like you don't sound like a black guy. Or, names matter. When we have names on paperwork, to use a nickname instead of this name because it sounds more acceptable to people. Like if your name's Shakishwa, you might say, my name's S or something like that, like your name SP. But we do that. So you and I went through that same experience. So as you see this unfold, and we talked about levels of wokeness and people judging people for the different levels, how are you kind of dealing with your family and your friends and your business with everything going on right now?
Yeah, it is an interesting time. I think the timing, what would I say, is the messages are timely, right? We have all this momentum, so you feel compelled to want to take advantage or feel compelled to want to be a part of the solutions, because they're ever present, and we've never been this close, to being able to actually accomplish some of these things. For your ancestors' sake, regardless of how well your business or potentially not business is doing, you take those steps and those strides to try to be a part of that because you're supposed to. I think that's what you end up growing up. This experience is about. I mean, even my name, for example, Benji Nunn, it's very, very disarming. I think my mother, on purpose, because of where we grew up. I grew up in Atlanta, Southwest Atlanta, during the 1980 crimes. It was a lot of kids being killed in the Atlanta area in the early 80s. So my mother had real fear of what that could actually look like growing up. So not only just the name to get past the resume, right? But also just, what is my son's life going to be like, knowing that they can take away little black boys and go missing and nothing happens and no one says anything. So those things happen. And then, just having that Atlanta experience, right? Knowing that Atlanta is Atlanta, but don't leave the outskirts. Don't leave outside of 285 because Atlanta is no longer Atlanta. Right? But as long as you're in that proximity, you got little Wakanda. So I grew up as a majority. And I took it for granted, I think, in some aspects, right? You didn't necessarily even pay attention to it. You just knew, your superintendent was Black. You had family members like, Horace Johnson's, Henry B. Russell. So you see Black excellence growing up in Atlanta, right? And you're exposed to that. But like I said, I don't think I took as much advantage of it. And I ended up getting more cultural experiences because of that. Doing different exchange programs, going and traveling to different high schools where you start getting those different cultures. You start to appreciate your culture more because you see the differences and the nuances, but you also begin to literally start to appreciate other cultures. Like, I think the first time I had sushi, I was like, this is like, just little things. You start to appreciate little cultures, or appreciate the little nuances about each culture, because it helps make up this diaspora. And I think even companies, even my company, we notice that the diversity helps our bottom line. And I think as companies start to kind of see their bottom lines affected, attention is being paid to. I don't know if it was because of the programming of TV and we're all not watching the same things, so we literally have to target people where they are, so that you can identify them. So now our culture and our differences become important, enough from an economic standpoint, right? And then, I think that's how we start. And I think as long as we try to control that narrative, right? Because we try to appreciate the fact that when our new brothers and sisters get enlightened of any culture, right? Enlightenment can happen at any stage in life. And I think it's important that we celebrate when that happens, regardless of when it happened to you,
Yeah, that's a big thing I think you and I hit on, because those people that I've been reading this stuff for 30 years, you late. And I think it's important to recognize it happens at a certain time. And Cher put a comment that she made a name consideration naming her kids. So Cher had the same thing. My dad, Daryl, I met several white Daryl, so my name is that way too. And I wanted to get deeper on this because you work in the HR space. So when you look at this, you got to deal with this with humans all the time. And diversity is a human thing. It's not really a bottom line thing. It's a human thing. So from your lens, as you are coaching companies with HR and everything, how do you see this playing out in the corporate space for Black Lives Matter is polarized and people see it a certain kind of way? And we're not here to plug Black Lives Matter, but it's just a movement for change. How do you see that playing out in the space of HR?
So two things. The first thing I want to chime in on is what Benji said about appreciating. I think Monique put it in the chat. It's about appreciating our own cultures. When we start to have that appreciation, it's a game changer. So when we stop saying, girl, why you name your child that? You know they can't get a job. Well, if I say they can't get a job and I look like them, what do I expect someone who doesn't look like them to say? What, like I remember my grandma saying, girl, you got to graduate because of that nappy head. If that's the message that we give, then what is someone that doesn't look like us going to give? So the appreciation and acceptance has to first start with us. So when I see one of my very good friends, his name is Danifu Elston, love me some Danifu, but Danifu on his resume would actually put his name phonetically. And one time someone actually called him and was honest and said, I'm glad you put your name phonetically, because if you had not, I was not going to call you for this job because I didn't know how to say your name. Right? That's what we deal with. And now we have to be mindful. The people that look like us have to be mindful. And I'm always like, listen, and when I do it for you, when I tell you, you better come in there and knock it out the park, because I promise you, I went to the mat for you. I went to the mat and put my own reputation on the line. Knock it out the park. Now, here's the reality. We have to get past that. You have to knock it out the park, because other people come in there and they're duds all the time. And no one bats an eye. Oh, that was a dud, move on. No, but we also have to be mindful of where we are. I'm mindful that when I step into the room, I'm representing, but I'm also honest. That's not fair. And we have to get to the point where it doesn't have to be that way. But that's where we are. We can't change the game until we know the game we're playing and playing it. Like you can't get into a football game, i.e. soccer, playing baseball rules. No. Get in the game, know the rules, and then I can be a game changer. So those of us who have gotten there, we have to now change the narrative. So in HR, when I see a name and it's Shanquisha, first of all, Shanquisha didn't name herself, and Shanquisha graduated from FAMU, which we know is a top business school in the nation. Shanquisha deserves an opportunity because that's a top 5 business school over Harvard, over Yale. Why wouldn't we consider Shanquisha when she has a degree from a top 5 business school? Those are the things and then we have to be intelligent enough, because I speak to so many HR professionals that don't know that our HBCUs do a phenomenal job specializing. So do you even know that FAMU is a top business school? Do you know that Tuskegee has top engineering graduates? Do you know these things about our HBCU so that you can intelligently speak to why this name doesn't matter, but this degree from this university does?
Yeah, and Daryl, let me chime in on this too, because I love what Deethra said, and I'm going to piggyback on what Ronell said before he jumped off the phone. But controlling our narrative, and in order for us to do that, because some of it's our fault and some of it's not, but we have not had the opportunity for whatever reason to control our narrative, and we're at a time, a very critical time. I feel like that we get to say, this is who we are. This is what we stand for. This is what whatever looks like, right? But if we don't take the opportunity right now, to Ronell's point, in terms of education, I see a lot of discussions going on back and forth, especially on socials, right? I'll say Facebook. And people are trying to control the narrative, but they're doing it misguided and with incorrect information, right? And so what happens is that at some point, somebody's going to have an "I gotcha" or an "uh-oh." We can't be in positions, and that's embarrassing, one, but it's unfortunate because we're not at a time or a place right now where we need to not be educated and not be 100% understanding of what our history looks like and what we want things to look like moving forward, and to create the story for all of that to happen, right? And so, and because I'm in media, right? I own a media company. And so I control several narratives where I get to control not just my messaging, but I can control what the messaging looks like for any Black person I pull into my network. And so I think if all of us thought in terms of, like Deethra, you said, in terms of how can I put myself in a position to control the narrative of all the Black people that I know, right? How can I be as intentional about the messaging that's being communicated about all of my Black circles, right? Whether they're internal, external, left, right, up or down, or otherwise, right? Because the narrative is the key, and owning that narrative. I mean, Benji, I think you mentioned you're from SWATs, right? And from South Atlanta, is that you, right? I call SWATs Sofu. That's the name I came up with for South Fulton, right? Sofu. But in Atlanta, and to your point, we've had so many people understand and know what Black excellence looks like. But guess what? We don't own anything, right? So my thing is, how many blocks can you walk up and down in pick a city, Atlanta, East Point, College Park, especially now, cities where it's a majority, right? The residents are majority Black, but who owns the land, right? Who owns the land? Who owns the dollar? That's when you really get the opportunity to control something. So it looks great. All of this stuff looks great on paper. We got people doing this and we got people doing that. But who owns the dollar and who owns the land? And so when people ask me, especially my white counterparts, and I have several of them and I know and love them, but when they ask me, what can I do? Or I'm sorry, I was having a conversation the other day with one of my clients and he's like, oh, I'm so sorry, Michelle, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. And I said, he said, what can I do? I said, how much money you got? Because I'm not about to sit here and listen to you tell me how sorry I am. I'm sure you are, and his heart was in the right place. He is. But guess what? That sorriness isn't helping us one bit. I said, what you can do is infiltrate the system, right? Help me control a narrative that's been controlled by people that have no interest in my best interest, right?
Mm-hmm.
Infiltrate the system, right? I was watching Grant the other day, and I thought it was amazing because one of the things that this isn't in the history books, nobody's going to talk about this, but Ulysses S. Grant actually had almost eradicated the KKK in his presidency, literally. And the way he did it is that he commandeered his cabinet and he pushed them back out and said, go find everywhere the KKK is. Be intentional about figuring out where they are. And his cabinet came back and said, they're everywhere. They're in the law enforcement. They're attorneys. They're doctors. They're politicians. They're everywhere. And he said, find them and get rid of them. Annihilate them. Destroy it. And by the time he was president, they had literally eradicated the KKK. Did you know that? And then somebody came in behind Grant and said, no, we don't like this. And that's part of the reason we're in the situation we are now.
Yeah. So basically saying put some action behind, like not just saying it.
Infiltrate the system. If somebody white asks me what I say, infiltrate your own system. Create a new one, right? Spend money in places that's going to help me and mine acquire land, right? Fund financial education and financial literacy because our problems are economic. They're not civil rights problems. They're not civil justice problems. They're economic problems. 9.9% reason we are where we are is because we haven't had the economics to be able to do anything differently. I'm sorry, I'm on a soapbox, but I'm done.
No, you're good. No, because
as a matter of fact, I love that you brought that up. The conversation that we have often is that you can be around wealth. You can learn. There's obviously a lot of information. We're in information age, so you can Google the information, but it's something about being taught and being kind of nurtured with that information because you don't learn through osmosis. You can't learn this wealth through just being around it, even though obviously I think, the saying is, 5 of your friends and you'll be the sixth in terms of success and richness. But we also need to define or redefine what rich looks like. I know when I grew up, you obviously had some of the regular business owners that you can obviously look at, wearing a suit, but those blue collar workers, the guy who owned the mortuary, there was a lot of success growing up in rural areas that I think I was able to pull from. And I think, Daryl, you can kind of contest too. When we went to Fort Valley, when we went down to the smaller schools, we saw wealth that didn't look the way I initially maybe perceived it to be. Farm.
Yeah.
That is interesting wealth, and it's longevity, and you can pass it on to generations. Because I always think that there's an interesting thing when you talk about wealth. I'm curious of the generation that we're talking about in that wealth. You know, are we talking about that first generation's wealth? Because I think first generation wealth and inherited wealth or perceived inherited wealth is completely different. You know, I think a lot of the people that maybe we're talking to, they didn't build their dad's company, so they don't know how to deconstruct it either. You know,
Yeah.
they didn't put it together. But we are first generation. We know how to build anything. We can put things together because, you know, some of the things that we're dealing with in this pandemic are, you know, we can kind of deal with lack. You know, we can make, you know, lemons out of, or lemonade out of lemons. So a lot of the times I think the resources and resourcefulness don't necessarily match up. I think we can do more with less. So to kind of, you know, go to your point, I think that it's us. I think it's the first generation. I think it's the less cars we buy and the more equity we buy instead.
Yeah. Preacher, go ahead, Deether. You have something to add to that.
Yeah, I wanted to chime in on that really quickly, and then I'm going to rotate off so someone else can rotate on. But two things. One thing, as we're addressing this, is we have to recognize, and this is where I'm seeing people fail, especially in my arena, is that we don't recognize the difference between people and systems. And so we're addressing people. My boss is a racist. The CEO is racist. Here's the deal. You have to ask yourself, what system has gaps in it that allows that person to be that way? Racism is a heart issue. I don't care about your heart. I care about your behavior, because your heart doesn't impact me, your behavior does. And so when we're addressing this issue, we have to address it systemically and know what that looks like. Systems are overarching things. So the example I give my clients is, in my house, I want everyone to be healthy. Now I can go to my children and my husband and say, don't eat chips, don't eat fried foods, while I'm steadily cooking those fried foods. But I'm the system that brings food into this house. I can change how everyone eats without talking to one person in my household. That's the system issues that we have to begin to look at from that perspective. And then when we talk about changing wealth and what wealth looks like, I love that Benji talked about that, because FYI, my husband's a graduate of Fort Valley State University.
What?
Nice.
But that we have to change our own narrative, because we've been fed the narrative that you got to go to college to be successful. And so we push that. 20, 30 years ago, you could not ask for a plumber without them being Black. You could not ask for a mason without it being a Black person. You could not ask for an electrician or a mechanic without it being a Black person. And now we bought into this idea because it's lesser to be that blue collar person. And listen, when I take my car to the dealership, I never leave without them getting $500 out of me minimum. Right? We have to change what acquiring success looks like. Even how we think of, oh, we need to be equally yoked, because if I have a degree, he has to have a degree. If I'm a doctor, she needs to be a lawyer. Nah, get me a mechanic, because at least my car can get free. Right? So when we begin to change the narrative of what success looks like, then our people begin to embrace it, and we can bring in that wealth. Farmers, land is a finite resources. Who has the land wins, right? And think about what people are paying for, and begin within our own community to respect that. I respect the mechanic just like I respect my doctor. I respect the electrician just like I respect my attorney. And when we begin to change that narrative about what success looks like, then we embrace it totally. And I'm not fit for college, but I am fit for technical school. And I can go over here and do this and still make money and be successful and be respected and held in high regard in my community, without forcing myself to do something that I know is not a fit and I'm not going to finish, right? So I'm going to roll off and let somebody else roll on. But Daryl, they're right.
We're wrapping up, Deether, though. Thank you, though. We're wrapping up, so you can stay if you need to.
Okay, I can stay then.
But I want to do one last thing to switch to Christina, because you actually work with investing in property and land all the time. So this is right up your alley. So you and I even talked about that a little bit offline. So as you're talking, as you hear this narrative of like, we need land, we need to invest and all that, what is some insight you can give the people that are watching this, saying like how to help? We want to help your people. How can I help? Is there something they can do with investing that can help with this?
So I understand with people asking and what they can do, but I'm also a firm believer in what we're talking about educating yourself, because I don't ever put my hands, put my life in somebody else's hands. Of just like, okay, well, I want you to do for me. What can you do for me? And I don't even know what you're doing, So educating ourselves, and you always hear me say, change starts with you. So if this is what I want to do, or if I'm understanding this wealth gap that I'm passionate about, Daryl,
Yeah.
I can't stand it, but I understand it, but it needs to change. And through, clients that I've had, I've been doing this for what, 2 years now. So through almost every client that I've had, they've been kind of unaware of, one, how credit affects their ability to buy a house, where they even start, what programs are out there, what resources they can use to be able to buy something. Oh, I don't have a lot of money, so I can't invest. Oh, that's for rich people. I'm not rich. And then you have all these fears that come with it of just when they do step out there. Oh, well, what if this happens? What if that happens? What if I lose? We're planning for retirement, or this, that, and other. I'm just like, if you just start with the education, build up yourself, get around people, whatever it may be. For me, I started with books. I just started reading, and saying, okay, well, I know that this is an issue. I know that myself, I don't know as much as these other people are. I would be in rooms and they're talking. I'm like, well, what? I don't know. I don't know about that. So just finding out, okay, there's a gap here that I need to learn. I need to learn more. So now I'm getting the books and I'm educating myself and I'm asking questions, and I'm not afraid to ask those questions. And I know that now I've built up this education that now I can go back. And then when I come in contact with my clients, I'm like, oh no, sweetie, we are not stopping at one house. We're going to get multiples. And this is how we're going to do it. And I'm going to set you up to be able to do it. And so I'm just more strategic. And that's how we can do if we start within. If we start with ourselves, if we understand this programming that's going on, and we're understanding how we talk to one another, even just from the, colored people always like, this and that, like, stop it. If you don't want somebody else to think of you in that manner, then you shut up and you stop. So if I realize that there is a gap in wealth, and I know that our people could be doing better, then let me step up and let me do something. What can I do? Okay, I'm good with numbers, so let me do this. And then now let me reach back and help other people get to the same point. And if we do more of that, I feel like we can control that narrative that Michelle was talking about, and changing the way that people view us. And just look, we'll work on that. We got to work on what people are thinking and what they're talking about. But let's focus here.
Yeah.
What can we do? So
that's a great way to cap it off. I think, Christina, I knew when we started talking about land, you had to say something. Yeah. But I want to be respectful of everybody's time. We got a lot of comments coming through and everything. And I know Dr. Imani had a wonderful poem I wanted to wrap out with. Today is actually the 5-year anniversary of Sandra Bland's death, which is crazy to think about that. You said 5 years, right, Dr. Imani?
Yes, 5 years.
5 years. Just think about that. It seemed like it was yesterday, and it's been 5 years since that happened. So
it does seem like it was yesterday. And one of the things that I know we're going to have many more conversations, but in terms of thinking about mentoring for empowerment, I've taught at Morehouse School of Medicine. I've worked with young children, and one of the most empowering programs I've worked with was at the DeKalb County Jail in DeKalb County, Georgia, where we were teaching the inmates about everything. Skills, giving them real skills so that they were empowered to go back to the community, and kind of break that cycle of recidivism coming in and out of jail. But I was really touched by, and I encourage people to see what they can do to impact our brothers and sisters who are incarcerated. Because as we're working on ourselves, we've got this population that just, in a lot of ways, just doesn't have a clue, doesn't have the resources, doesn't have the education. I work with so many people who said, if I had had this information when I was, in the 3rd or 4th grade, I wouldn't be here right now. So we really have to think about that population. I have a book coming out, Educating the Incarcerated, where I talk a lot about the folks that have come through that program. People like folks in this room who have taken time out just to go and to give back and to share skills and information and so forth. I know we're wrapping up. So I will share the piece that I wrote on Sandra Bland after she passed. I was so touched by her passing and how strange it was, how, you know, the events that happened that led to her death. And so I'll just read it. And I think those of you who remember the story, you'll get it. Sandra Bland. I think of you all the time. I drive daily and change lanes often without signaling. In fact, every time I do, I say your name in my head, Sandra Bland. Your name is now synonymous with changing lanes without permission, Sandra Bland. Synonymous with speaking your mind, Sandra Bland, telling the truth and pissing people off. Perhaps your crime wasn't really about changing lanes at all, Sandra Bland, but refusing to stay in the lane assigned by your birthright as a Black woman. Stay in your place, follow the rules, do as you are told, put out your cigarette, pledge allegiance to the flag, shut the fuck up, Sandra Bland. Speaking up has never been a crime for other women. Well, certainly not to the same extent. Sandra Bland, your life was anything but bland. You lived in Technicolor with explosive and powerful words for your people. Your crime was speaking up, speaking out, and telling the truth. While you were focused on liberating others by telling the truth, they hung you in a jail cell and lied about you hanging yourself. Well, 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 Black women, Black woman swinging from a noose in a cell. Not a pretty sight. It's not right. Black women's lives matter. Say her name, Sandra Bland. Say her name, Sandra Bland. Say her name, Sandra Bland.
Ooh, thank you for that. Thank you, everybody. This is like giving, like I said in the beginning, like giving birth for me as a man, because this took a lot of time to get all these people together. I appreciate you guys hanging with me. We had technical issue. We broke the internet. We blacked out the timeline, all that good stuff. Thank you, Dr. Money, for that poem. That was a great way to end this off. Everybody in the comments, I hope you got some value out of this. The point is to have a dialogue. So if somebody that watched this is not melanated, thank you. A shout out to Michael Mayer. He had a couple of comments in there. That's Michelle's best friend there on LinkedIn. So Michael, thanks for jumping on. But thank you all for supporting this, because this is to start the conversations. If we can know each other's story, we can better get along. If we know each other's story, we can better communicate. So this was, I hope nobody took negatively from this. This is just all of us sharing our experiences, so that way we can better communicate. So as you navigate the internet, use this as a chance to have a better conversation with somebody you couldn't talk to before. And if you're a Black professional that had a hard time figuring out your way as a Black professional, I hope we helped you, because the point of this is to see there's all different diversities, different countries, different states in this chat. So I appreciate you guys joining us. We might do this in the future. Who knows? People ask for it to happen again. So if I have enough whiskey or vodka in my closet, maybe I'll do it again. Who knows? But thank you,
so
folks.
much, Daryl. This was amazing. Great job.
Yes.
Kudos.
Yeah, awesome.
Absolutely.
Awesome
Thank
job.
you.
The way to host
Thank you.
And breathe life into it, Daryl. Sincerely appreciate it. So, and I'm sure we will do another one. And like I said, I just enjoy sitting back and you see me like just.
Yeah, that's how.
Hey, this is harder than CNN, because CNN gets commercials. I had no commercial break, so this is much more difficult than live TV on MSNBC or anything like that. So thank you guys. It'll be on replay. Share it with someone that needs to watch it, and we'll do this again hopefully in the future.
Great job.
All right.
Thanks so much.
See you later.
And StreamYard is trying to wake up, so whenever it just has an end. Hold on. Uh-oh. We broke the internet.